All right, so we're here with Amy Lollis, who's another one of our amazing teachers at Quilt 2024. Amy, wonderful to see you. I could do the intro, but let's have you introduce yourself instead.
Sure. So I'm Amy from Happy Hippie Studio, and I am teaching the junk quilting course on incorporating vintage finds, doilies, other random junk that we find thrifting into our quilt tops. And most of my work is bright and scrappy, and moving into the junk quilting is a bit of a new aesthetic for me, but it's not a new technique, and I'm super, super excited to share it.
That's amazing. So how did you start with the junk quilting? Like, did you inherit these things or something?
Sort of. I've been crocheting since I was a little girl, and I haven't done it a lot lately. I fell in love with, sewing and quilting, and so crocheting kind of took a back seat. But I have bags and bags and bags and bags of all these doilies and these beautiful things that I made throughout my life. And then, as you do when you go thrifting, you find like, oh, there's a pretty vintage pillowcase, or there's just these bits and bobs of things that are nice, but like, what do you do with them?
Mhm.
And one day I made this really scrappy, low volume quilt, and on a whim started sewing my doilies into it and on top of it. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, the texture. And then I never did it again. And then recently, some quilty friends were like, I have all these doilies that were my grandmother's. What do I do with them? And I was like, I have something for you. And that's how junk quilting was born.
Awesome. Yeah, I know so many of us have these kind of inherited pieces or pieces we've seen in thrift stores or antique shops that just they're so beautiful, but they're so not what we use nowadays. So I think this is brilliant that you've got this new reason for using them. So let's go back a bit. You mentioned that you used to do a lot of crochet. How did you get into quilting?
I started quilting when my oldest baby was teeny tiny. I was a stay-at-home mom, a new stay-at-home mom. I'd left my career to stay at home with her and had horrible postpartum depression. And I just needed something that I could do that stayed done. Unlike all the endless tasks of taking care of a newborn, I
Right.
needed to do something every day that stayed done when I left the room. And so I got like a Walmart Black Friday special sewing machine and some $3 a yard fabric from Joann's and was off to the races.
And what was your first quilt like?
Awful. It was a jelly roll race quilt. I had no idea about seam allowances. It took me several quilts to learn that a 3/8 inch seam allowance is actually not going to work.
Mm.
And it fell apart the first time I washed it. It was terrible, but you start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And you've obviously come on leaps and bounds since then. Tell us about the amazing quilt on the wall behind you.
This is Small Favors. This one was written about 2 years ago, but it wasn't completed and published until last month. So Small Favors is a novel by the New York Times bestselling author Erin Craig. And I randomly stumbled on her book in the library. Thank you, librarians. If you're not utilizing their services, you are doing yourself a disservice. And
Absolutely.
read the book and was like, this is such a cool theme. I have to make a quilt. And I designed the quilt, had no idea what to do with it at that point. I had no pattern writing skills. But yeah, you just leave it, sometimes you table things. And then I learned to write patterns. I wrote the pattern and randomly looked her up on social media, which I never do for authors. And I looked her up and turns out she's also a quilter. And I was like, hey, I know this is weird and creepy and stalkerish, but I wrote a pattern based on Small Favors. Do you want like a copy of it? And so she helped promote it. We've become great friends. And if you like reading, she's not horror. She's eerie, but not horror. So like check her out. She's super cool. And she's a
Oh,
quilter.
awesome. I'll put a link to her in the interview notes.
Awesome.
It's a beautiful quilt, but I'm also interested in how you're hanging it there. Is that like a moving design wall?
It is. And I would get up and show you, but I'm in my pajamas.
Don't.
Um, Tuesdays are my day to look cute from the, waist
Yeah,
up.
yeah, absolutely.
So it's actually a curtain rod and that's just affixed to the wall and it has clip rings on it. So the rings move and I can put 30 or 40 rings and hang multiple quilts or just one. And then when I don't have a quilt hanging up to be a pretty backdrop, I'll hang a piece of batting from it to use as a design wall.
That
So
is so clever, because I suppose you could even do it across a window, like temporarily. That's such a clever use of
oh, that is a good
space.
idea. Yeah. I
Um,
have to leave everything temporary. I have cats. So if you leave things hanging too long, they climb.
I
Um,
know mine isn't a climber, as I'm very grateful for,
Thank
but
goodness.
I know many that are. And another thing, you mentioned the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which of course is common in dressmaking and
Sure.
clothes. And you've got these two amazing coats behind you. So is this
Yes.
another area that you're working on?
I didn't start making coats until about 2 years ago. I stumbled on the Sew Willow on Etsy and was like, oh, what the heck, I'll give it a try. I grew up watching my mom make clothes and she was so good at it. And then when I tried to make clothes, I was not good at it.
Hmm.
My first pair of pants had two right legs. It was just really awkward. So her patterns were written for people with a quilting background. And her seam allowances are, you like DIY your own seam allowances,
Mhm.
which made it super easy because I was like, oh, I know what to do with this. So these are the same pattern. That one's been altered for an art gallery lookbook to showcase a bit more of a bohemian vibe. And that
Ah,
was
lovely.
the very first one. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, well, I'll definitely, I mean, I want to look her up myself, but I'll link to her in the interview notes as well. Um, so I know you've struggled with a lot of health challenges in your life. How have you had to adapt your craft and quilting and your business because of those?
Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
definitely a
It is
loaded
a
question.
lot. It's a big question.
So in 2019, I started having like fatigue. And I was
Mm.
like, well, whatever, I've got three kids, I'm busy. I just need an extra cup of coffee. And by the end of 2019, I was so ill. I didn't know if I was going to make it to the end of 2020. Um, Ironically, little did we know
Yes.
everybody was going to have the same problem.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like back and forth. And, you hear the horror stories of like, my doctor didn't believe me. They can't find anything wrong. It was that. It was everyone I went to was like, well, maybe you need to go to this other person. And I finally found a naturopath who was like, look, we're going to do all the things, all the blood work, all at the same time. And we're going to figure this out. And even they weren't able to give me a definite answer. So I ended up with kind of a triple diagnosis. I have alpha gal syndrome, which is an allergy to meat and dairy from a tick bite.
Whoa.
Welcome to living on a farm.
Yeah.
Actually, we bought it to have a goat dairy, and now I can't have dairy. And then I ended up with mast cell activation syndrome and PMDD, which is premenstrual dysmorphic disorder, where when your progesterone drops, so does everything.
Oh,
Your mental health, ability to concentrate, physical health, everything just crashes. And it's for 3 or 4 days out of every month. So those things are now managed pretty well, but when they were not managed, I couldn't sew a straight line. My vision would go in and out. I had MS type symptoms where I would just lose motor control. And I had to design things that were forgiving because my seam allowances were not going to be straight. Nothing was going to be straight. And then this concept of like, I was watching, I was watching my craft change and it seemed like it was going backwards. Like I was losing my skills, but they were getting more beautiful.
mm.
I was only like I have a very short amount of time every day that I'm okay physically and mentally to create. And I'm going to use those moments to work with fabrics that just make me light up. And I got rid of everything that didn't. And then I realized I can't sew a straight line with the sewing machine because it goes so fast. I can't keep up. So I started hand quilting. And my hand quilting, some days it was sloppy. The stitches were huge. It was awful. And then there were days when it was beautiful and straight. And I was looking back at the things I was creating and going, wow, this is a journal. This is a journal of who I was this day, who I was this day. It's a journal of my symptoms. And as I got healthier, they became journals of my healing. And then that just evolved into, okay, well, when I started pattern writing, how many other people are having these problems? And I've had people reach out to me on social media and on my website and say, oh my gosh, I've got the same thing. And it's just a community. It's
Mm.
the people who are like, I can't produce perfection. I can't produce Instagram and Pinterest worthy things because of finances, because of my health, because I don't have time, because I'm a mom with depression, because you know, all these things. We're all human. We're not magazine machines.
I mean, that's incredible. That's such a lot. And to have incorporated that into your work and to have managed it into your lifestyle, I mean, that's just yeah, that's huge. I know the artist and quilter Heidi Parks has also had some challenges in the past, and I think I'm right in saying that she worked with a naturopath as well. So it just goes to show there's always more to learn, and different ways of doing things. I suppose I'm curious, like with this precious amount of time you have every day, how do you kind of prioritize what you want to work on next? Is it things that will bring you joy? Is it things that will develop your business? Or is it both, hopefully, I guess?
Well, that is part of how I built the business. I don't do things that don't bring me joy.
Mm.
I don't take opportunities that don't light me up. That way, yes, I do work on deadlines. I work with fabric companies and I work on my own, you know, editorial schedule, but I'm not going to make something that I don't love, because, you know, and I'm a mom. I have 3 kids at home. You know, my husband works crazy hours. So no, I don't have time to prioritize things that don't light me up. And I'm not going to. I'm not ever going to. So there's a lot of boundaries around time. And I think that it's part of it is just radical acceptance and self-love. Knowing that I don't have the capacity that other people do, and just being okay with that and making the most of what I do have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's just kind of what you have to do. So what things are on your kind of bucket list for the future in terms of making and quilting?
Bucket list. So like it's secrets probably out now that I'm telling you. I am working on a fabric line. I won't it'll be 2026 before we see it. Next year, 2024, I'm doing an ambassadorship with Benartex. And I honestly have no idea what that's going to look like as a scrap quilter. But they're great to work with, and they've assured me that like their expectations are the same as mine, that my boundaries will be honored around my what I work with, and only doing the things that make me come alive. So that's next. Also with the junk quilting, I'm working on some notions with CNT and a class and a book that will also bring crochet and quilting together. And that's been on my bucket list since I was a little girl, because you know those industries are separate, but like if you love them both, let's bring them together.
And there's so many people that do. I know a lot of people will be really interested in this, and I don't want to, ask you for industry secrets or anything, but how did these opportunities come around? Like, did people approach you? Did you approach people? Like, how
It was Quilt Market.
Things happened? It was what? Sorry,
it was Quilt Market. I went to Quilt Market. I have no fear of embarrassment or shame whatsoever, and just walked up to people and was like, "Hey, I've got this idea." And some were like, "Yeah, that's weird," and then others were like, "Yeah, send me a proposal." So it's in the works. There's, you know, you work with multiple brands and you figure out which one's gonna feel like home and which one's gonna be want to work with your idea and fit you into their editorial calendar. So again, it takes a long time. You know, it's a year process from idea to bringing something to market.
Yeah, and especially if the fabric line won't come out until 2026. I mean, I guess then you're kind of thinking of forecasting and so on in terms of colors and palettes and so on, and what's going to be hot when that happens. So
but you can't tell. You
no,
know,
of course.
you can't tell. And so that's part of why it's again important to set boundaries and work on things that are personally perfect. You know, you create your own trends.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Well, with all these achievements and highlights coming up, I feel like this is a bit unfair to ask, but is there anything that you're particularly proud of, either in your business or your personal quilting journey?
Yes, and it has nothing to do with quilting.
Mm.
So the journey through the autoimmunity, and then through starting a business, and through homeschooling 3 kids. I've learned how to set the boundaries again, and I keep coming back to that, and I keep coming back to that. How to say no, and how to really get a good idea of what I have the capacity for, as a human, as a mom, and then just letting go of the guilt and shame for the things that you can't do. And I think as moms especially, we need that.
Absolutely. Yes. I am not a parent myself, but I have many friends who are. And yeah, I see that people guilting themselves about these things all the time. Is there like a technique you've used that has helped you build up this strength and this muscle?
Letting things go.
Yeah.
Just letting things go.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Okay. So you mentioned your workshop with the junk quilting, and we talked about how that came about. What are the kinds of techniques that we're going to be seeing in that workshop?
So the 2 that I'm teaching in the workshop don't actually require you to have any crochet skills. So I'm going to be teaching putting doilies and other crocheted vintage items just on top of your quilt block. And then I'm also going to be teaching you how to inset them in the quilt block, so they are sewed in with the fabric, and how to quilt in them and around them for sustainability, so that you can use your quilt.
Oh, fascinating. And can you wash the quilts afterwards as well?
Oh
Like,
yeah, we use ours.
oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Okay. Well, look, this has been really fascinating, and I know we've already heard what you're planning to work on in 2024. It sounds like it's going to be a very busy year. Where can people find you online?
So my website is happyhippiestudio.com, and I am on Instagram at happyhippiestudio, and that's about it.
And where did the business name come from? Do you think of yourself as a happy hippie?
First of all, I like alliterations. They
Mm-hmm.
sound nice. So it sounds nice. It was either that or Plucky Plum Designs. And I couldn't get the URL for Plucky Plum. So the happy hippie part, yes, this was my lifeline when my mental health was struggling. So it is kind of an evolution of mental health, and the connection with others, and the hippie lifestyle, which admittedly I'm not great at, but again, we're letting go of perfection, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just letting go of guilt. Absolutely. Well, look, thank you. It's been great to talk to you. And I've really enjoyed it. And I'm going to go and look up all the people that you've been talking about.
Fall down a rabbit hole of really great books.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.